Hello, I'm Andy Mock with CATS. I'm the Senior Project Manager for the LYNX Silverline project. I want to thank you for attending the fifth LYNX Silverline meeting focused on the area between Idlewild Road and Union County line near CPCC in the town of Matthews. Public meetings 1 through 4 have been recorded and are available for your review at the CATS YouTube page. That will include everything from Belmont through the center city of Charlotte and Independence Boulevard out to Idlewild Road. The focus of tonight's meeting will be the next section to the Union County line. Then the next public meeting, which will be on September 29th, will be on the Union County section, and that will include Stallings and Indian Trail, and that will be on September 29th at 5:30. To give you a brief overview of the Silverline before we get into the program, the Silverline is a transformational 26-mile light rail project, which spans from the city of Belmont through Center City, Charlotte, along Independence Boulevard, transitioning to Monroe Road, out to the town of Matthews, and with it a potential extension into Union County. I'd like to recognize some elected officials tonight who were able to join us. Mayor John Higdon from the town of Matthews, and Mayor Pro Tem Renee Gardner, also with the town of Matthews. Thank you for your attention on this very important project. Before we start the meeting, I would suggest that you might want to visit our website. That's www.ridetransit.org/LYNX-Silverline to follow along with the live online map tool that we've developed. That's going to be the main part of the conversation tonight and the main public engagement tool that we're using for this round of public engagement, and we're receiving your public input on. So just some notes for some nuts and bolts of conversation. Panelists, please remain on mute until the QA portion of the meeting. For the public, we do have a very talented group of panelists from the town of Matthews, Park and Recs, NCDOT, City of Charlotte that kind of assist answering some of your questions as well as within CATS. Participants, please log into your Gmail or your YouTube account to participate in a live Q&A after the video and presentation. Log off on any organizational VPNs for better performance. And post any questions in the chat box in YouTube to be answered at the end of the meeting. So very brief agenda tonight. We're going to give, I've already given you we're going to get ready to give you the project overview, which is a short video, which gives you kind of a lot of the history of kind of how we got here, along with a snapshot of where we are. Then a focus area presentation where I'll walk you through or drive you through the online map, kind of show you some of the tool that we've created and the various options that are under consideration and how we can receive your public input. And also then do a live Q&A session where we'll answer your questions. If we don't get to all your questions tonight, we will post answers to all questions on our website for your review later. So with that, let's start the video. Hello, I'm Andy Mock, the LYNX Silverline Senior Project Manager. This video is the first in a series of videos and will provide an overview of the proposed LYNX Silverline Light Rail project. We are currently in the transportation planning or pre-project development phase of work, and we are conducting early scoping in coordination with the Federal Transit Administration, referred to as FTA. We will discuss more about early scoping later on, as well as provide you with an update on progress since March of 2020, and explain how you can provide input. I'd like to introduce you to our project team. First, leading the LYNX Silverline Light Rail project is myself, and Jenna Nichols, the Deputy Project Manager. Ajanelle Poole is the CATS Public and Community Relations Specialist dedicated to the project. The LYNX Silverline Light Rail is part of a larger community program which includes related but separate studies. The Transit Development Study, referred to as TOD, as well as a rail trail study. John Howard is the project manager for the TOD study, and Jason Lawrence is the project manager for the rail trail project study. There will be more to come on the TOD and rail trail planning in the future, but today, as a part of early scoping, we are focused on the light rail project. Now that you've met the team, let's talk about the actual LYNX Silverline Light Rail project. The LYNX Silverline is a proposed 26-mile light rail project from the city of Belmont through Center City, Charlotte, and the town of Matthews, with a potential extension into Union County. We are growing as a region, and coordination is key. Throughout the project, we will coordinate efforts with several other programs, agencies, and projects. Currently, CATS and FTA are conducting early scoping. Yes, we recognize it's a very technical term, but essentially it means that we are seeking your feedback on the ongoing planning analysis to better define the project before entering project development in the National Environmental Policy Act, referred to as NEPA. Let's talk about how we got to this point. Rapid transit has been discussed in Charlotte for decades. In 1998, the City of Charlotte prepared the 2025 Integrated Transit Land Use Plan, which proposed using rapid transit to support focusing future growth in Charlotte's key centers and corridors. The West Corridor along Wilkinson Boulevard and the Southeast Corridor along Independence Boulevard were two of the identified corridors. Additional planning efforts have occurred, and the plan is now referred to as the 2030 Transit System Plan. In 2016, CATS completed the Southeast Corridor Transit Study, which considered various transit technologies and alignments. The study included a detailed technical evaluation and extensive public and stakeholder engagement. Our policy board, referred to as the Metropolitan Transit Commission, or MTC, adopted an LPA, short for Locally Preferred Alternative, for a light rail project in the 13-mile Southeast Corridor from Center City, Charlotte to the Mecklenburg and Union County border. More recently, CATS completed the LYNX system update, which studied various technologies and alignment alternatives for the West Corridor and Center City, Charlotte. In February 2019, the MTC adopted a light rail LPA for the West Corridor and combined it with the Southeast Corridor LPA to make one continuous 26-mile light rail corridor from Belmont to Matthews, with a potential extension into Union County, known as the LYNX Silver Line. Now we are assessing new opportunities and risks in order to refine the LPA and help determine the alignment and options that may be carried forward into environmental review under NEPA. During the early scoping process, we start to develop the purpose and need statement, which is consistent with previously identified public and stakeholder goals. The purpose and need statement defines the fundamental reason why the project is being proposed, and it's the foundation for the environmental review process. The needs are the why the proposed action is needed, and the purpose is the what CATS intends to accomplish. The purpose and need will be refined during planning and through environmental review, with additional input from the public, stakeholders, and regulatory agencies. This screen shows identified preliminary transportation needs in the LYNX Silver Line corridor. The preliminary purpose of the LYNX Silver Line project is to provide high-capacity transit service in dedicated right-of-way along identified roadways that address the desired transportation outcome shown on the screen. The full preliminary purpose and needs statement is available in the online open house. Let us know if you have any comments in the online survey, also available in the online open house. You may be asking yourself, why are we refining the alignment if it was adopted by the MTC, the CATS Policy Board? Although some of the alignment was adopted in 2019, the Southeast Corridor was adopted in 2016. Just think about how much of our infrastructure changed in the region over the last 4 years. In that time, a lot of construction has occurred. We opened the LYNX Blue Line extension and have learned so much that we can bring to this project. Additionally, we will be conducting additional engineering and environmental evaluations to learn more about the corridor and continue asking for your input. Now that you know why we are looking at refinements, let's talk about the decision-making process. We want to maximize the benefits of the proposed project while minimizing the risks. We're evaluating many factors as we refine the LPA, again, the locally preferred alternative, including public input, design constraints, environmental considerations, a quality rider experience, coordination with other projects, and land use surrounding the potential stations. We have developed several alignment refinement options for your review. These options may enhance benefits or address risks associated with the LPA. However, the alignment options also have their own pros and cons, as described in the interactive comment map on the online open house. As referenced earlier, we have been and will continue to think about environmental resources as we refine the LPA and move into environmental review under NEPA. We are looking for your feedback on the environmental considerations that we have identified and whether there are more to consider. Overall, we're asking you to provide input on a number of critical factors. Since the corridor is quite long, at approximately 26 miles, we have broken it up into 6 focus areas. You can get more detailed information about the alignment options within each focus area by using the interactive comment map in the online open house. There are short videos that describe pros and cons of the alignment options for each focus area. Please review the videos at your convenience, available on the online open house from August 31st to October 14th. Once you review all the information, let us know what you think. There are a number of ways you can provide your input. Browse around the online open house to learn more about the project. Leave comments on the interactive comment map and take the public survey. We are hosting live virtual public meetings on September 15th, 16th, 17th, 22nd, 24th, and 29th at 5:30 p.m. Each of these meetings will include this general project overview, plus a more detailed discussion on one of the focus areas. Check the project website, ridetransit.org/LYNX to learn more about how you can access the meetings and the focus areas that will be featured in each one. Additionally, you can request a virtual meeting with our team for your business or neighborhood group by contacting us via email at lynxsilverline@publicinput.com or the CATS customer service via phone at 704-336-RIDE. That's 704-336-7433. If you prefer to submit a hard copy of your comments, you can send a letter to CATS, care of Agenel Pool, at 600 East 4th Street, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28202. Public comments must be submitted by October 14th, as we will conclude the early scoping period. The feedback we receive from you will help us make decisions as we move into next steps. In 2021, the team plans to have a refined LPA that we will present for adoption by the MTC and carry forward into the detailed NEPA environmental review process. Prior to adoption by the MTC, we will conduct another round of public meetings to share our recommendations. Depending on the public and agency input, there may be more than one option in certain locations. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you in advance for sharing your input with us. Your feedback will help to shape and create a light rail line that will serve our region for many generations to come. So thank you for watching that video. I'm going to do a brief introduction to kind of the online tools and where you can find things, and then we're going to dive into the online open house map. So this website that you see is www.ridetransit.org/LYNX. This is a great starting place. This is how you get to the online open house. So you'll see this tab right below if you're following along. If you click on that link, it will take you to the kind of the landing page for the round 2 public engagement process. The first tab you see here really has some good introductory videos and information with a nice clear map if you're interested in a lot of good historical information, the same video that we saw before. So if you really want to kind of soak in the Silver Line and kind of learn more about it, the first tab is a good place to go. However, because of the focus area 5 is so big, we want to make sure we get enough time to really give a thorough overview of the alignments on the table and build in lots of time for your question and answers. So we're going to kind of skip through some of that and really kind of get into the online map. So the best way to navigate the online map is really on the right side. There's a gray bar. This kind of up and down arrows are a good way to kind of bounce around between the focus areas. If you're interested in multiple focus areas, if you're into the airport or whatever, you can kind of scroll through the individual focus areas to learn more about them using this gray bar on the right side. Also, one of the things we always lead with is a question for each one of the focus areas, the questions we're trying to answer. And so in focus area 5, it's one of the biggest focus areas on the project. Focus area 5 is how will the LYNX Silver Line transition from Independence Boulevard to Monroe Road, and what is the alignment through Matthews? So just to give a little history, back when the system plan was being reviewed back in 2016, it was identified as critical to get from Independence Boulevard over to Monroe Road, and it was identified that this area, that transition point would occur. So really there's 3 big questions or 3 big decisions that make up the make up this focus area, and it's how the transition from Independence Boulevard to Monroe works, how you get from that transition to downtown Matthews, and then how you get through downtown Matthews. And if you look on this right side, there's a nice narrative description of all these things if you'd like to read more about it. But to simplify things, there's a little hot link under the transition, and it kind of shows you, and I'm going to click that box off for a second so I can give you an orientation real quick. But that's a good way to kind of get oriented. If you're most interested in the area around that transition, you can click on this and it'll zoom into the specific areas. So just to give folks a drive-through orientation, and I'm going to go decision by decision in each option that's on the table and spend a little time getting into some of the details. And then we can kind of go from there into like a simplified pros and cons list, and then I'll kind of explain how we're receiving public input. So just as a note also, the purple line is always a locally preferred alternative that was adopted back in 2016 and then readopted in 2019. The yellow or gray lines are options that were identified through stakeholder engagement earlier this year, primarily as a response to uncertainties or risks or missed opportunities of the LYNX Silver Line. So as we got into the details of the Silver Line, we identified that, hey, maybe this is worth another look. And through continued refinement and stakeholder engagement, we kind of feel like these are things that are worthy of public input. So now you have a little context. So we're following Independence Boulevard, the locally preferred alternative, the purple line, on the southern side or bottom line, past Idlewild and Conference, and then it transitions near Wallace Road, coming along this area, and then parallel to Village Lake Drive, and then enters into the median of Monroe Road, going underneath CSX Railroad. And then so that's the kind of the end of the first decision point. So if you look at the pros and cons of that decision, so the pro of the LYNX Silver Line is you get to Monroe Road. It's kind of one of the more straightforward ways to just kind of get from Independence to Monroe, which is one of the goals identified through the system plan. So it does what's required. However, because of that alignment, there are some substantial acquisition and relocation of some residential properties. So that's a major concern for us. As you get into, there's some this area right here. If I can, let me see if I can. There we go. Coming through this area, there's some residential property that would be impacted or potentially impacted by that locally preferred alternative. There is also a greater potential for impacts to water resources, streams, and wetlands. And we mentioned a little bit in the video, the environmental review, because this is intended to be a federally funded project, it will have to go through a very strenuous environmental review. So anytime you're impacting the natural environment in this way, there's a lot of concerns with how that could affect your permitting and your ability to actually deliver the project. And it also requires an aerial station. Let's see if I can get rid of that. At this location, which is aerial stations are historically harder for folks to access. So a lot of folks don't like to go up on aerial stations, harder for them to access. You have to have elevators and those sort of things. So there's some concerns with the locally preferred alternative in this area. Because of that concern, we identified an alternative to that. We actually identified 3 alternatives to that. And to kind of zoom in to give you kind of an orientation to that, the first alternative, which we call option A1, along with Marca, comes along Independence Boulevard, similar to the LPA, but transitions and deviates from the locally preferred alternative in this area, and then comes down the edge of this residential street called Lumarca Drive, and then enters over Monroe Road, and then along the southern side of Monroe Road to this area right here, which we've been discussing, has been discussed over time as a potential redevelopment opportunity. So, and then it transitions into the median of Monroe Road. So the pros and cons of this one, one of the biggest pros of this one is that it gives you an at-grade or street level station at Monroe Road, which is much easier to access, much easier to accommodate new development around it. So that's a net positive, that the station is better positioned. It also is the station located further up, closer to Independence, is also at grade, with a little easier for the neighborhood to actually access it. So there's a neighborhood benefit there as well. It has a lower potential impact for water resources, streams, and wetlands. So there's less of an environmental concern from a natural resource perspective. And it's closer to, again, I said, it's closer to the neighborhoods of the station and development opportunities, which was one of the goals of this area here. However, there is still residential impacts related to this option, but they're less so than the locally fertile alternative. So it's just, that's the drawback of this one. So option 1B, again, is similar. I'm going to zoom into that one a little bit before the box comes up and blocks the way. It goes past where the transition occurs for both the locally fertile alternative and option 1A, parallels Independence Boulevard further up, and then transitions adjacent to the McAlpine Greenway, and then does this curve and then enters into Monroe Road. So the pros and cons of this one are there is a lower potential for acquisitions and relocations of residents. So this has a much less residential impact than the first two alternatives that we talked about. But there's greater potential for impacts to the park, because even though we're going adjacent to the park, we are still impacting the McAlpine Park and Greenway and floodplains. There are several driveways and business impacts along Independence Boulevard that the others don't have. That's this section right here. There's a lot of car dealerships and other businesses along here, which the frontages would be impacted. And the station located near Monroe and McAlpine Creek is very high. It's elevated very high in the air, and so it's very difficult to reach for our customers. So definitely some drawbacks to that alternative, but it does mitigate some of those or improve some of those impacts to the residential properties that were a concern from the first two. And then the third option is what we call near Creffield, and it kind of similar in that it comes along the frontage. It comes along past where the transitions. However, because of the transition is further up, we can kind of come off the back side of the alignment and not have those impacts on the businesses on the front. So you still have bit impacts, but it's to the rear of the site. Then transitions parallel over McAlpine Creek with less impacts because we're transitioning perpendicularly, with the station near McAlpine or near Creffield Drive, future Creffield Drive, and then transitions this big curve that goes over and then over to CSX Railroad and into Monroe Road. That's what we call option 1C near Creffield. So along those lines, the pros and cons are it has lower potential for residential impact. So that it also mitigates the concern or improves the impact of the residential impacts from the first two alternatives. And it has lower impact on the park of that. McAlpine had that impact on the park. So there's less impact on the park and the residential. However, it kind of misses the point of the system plan, which is really try to get to this area. So we kind of miss that opportunity of getting to that redevelopment opportunity. And it's a lot further away from these neighborhoods that we're trying to serve as well. So it misses the mark a little bit on the station layouts and how people are actually going to use them. It also has more driveway impacts. So we have more business impacts than the last option because you're extending along Independence Boulevard further. And there's a lot of businesses and driveways in this section. And you're also, because of this curve, you're actually adding about a half mile of track length to the overall alignment, which means that it's going to be a longer trip. If you were in downtown Matthews, you want to go downtown, it's going to be a little bit longer. So those are some of the trade-offs from decision 1, which is that transition point. I'll then go to decision 2, which is how you basically get from this area to downtown Matthews, and there's 2 choices on the table. And one is the locally preferred alternative along Monroe Road, and I'll click on that dot. So in this case, it then picks up where those other ones left off, and then it inserts light rail into a newly created median for within Monroe Road. This is similar to North Tryon Street, if people are familiar with the LYNX blue line from Old Concord Road out towards UNC Charlotte. The working assumption is that we would rebuild Monroe Road in a similar nature, widening out on either side and placing light rail into a new median. And that would go along here, past Sardis Road, to a station near the Galleria, and then transition out of the median on a bridge over the CSX Railroad, and then into and adjacent to Sam Knoll Road, underneath 51 and Trade for the station near Presbyterian, or sorry, Novant Matthews. And I think this is where, yeah, I think this is where this one ends, right? So the pros and cons of this one are, it is closer to neighborhoods and development opportunities. One of the main reasons that this area was identified back at the system plan is to really look at opportunities to redevelop Monroe Road, and to not just redevelop, but intensify Monroe Road to create more development opportunities and density. Also, but the downside, it does require a complete reconstruction and widening of Monroe Road. So as you insert light rail, you got to rebuild the street, and that has cost impacts, and it will have construction impacts as you rebuild the street and have to maintain traffic and shift traffic around. The option to that is to parallel the CSX Railroad from near McAlpine Creek to the downtown Matthews. So the pro of that is it does minimize the need to reconstruct Monroe Road. So you don't need to rebuild Monroe Road. So there's a cost savings, and there's a lesser impact on the community by not having to rebuild Monroe. And because the light rail is fairly straight, there's no real crossings or side streets, we'll have faster, more reliable trains. So if you're from downtown Matthews to this area, you will be able to get that. You'll be more reliable. The train will be more reliable and more fast. However, it is kind of tucked away. So the station back here at Sardis Road will be harder for people to reach. So if you build a light rail and build stations that people have a difficult time getting to, that's maybe not in your interest either. So the station's a little harder to reach. And also you miss some of the development opportunities that you got with the LPA, which came along the frontage of Monroe Road. And it also requires an agreement with CSX Railroad, who owns and operates the railroad here. And that increases the complexity of the overall project and construction. So that's a challenge that would have to be overcome. And so the final decision for tonight is how you get through Matthews. And so if we click on that one, let me zoom in a bit. If we're following the locally preferred alternative, we're going over CSX, then we're paralleling, Sam Knoll, going under 51, under Trade. Then we're having a station on Novant's campus. Now this station would be configured kind of in a cut or below street elevation. So there's some placemaking challenges there, but there's kind of that scene or that visualization you can imagine. Then exiting Novant campus, we go under Matthews Midhill Road, and then along future Independence Point Parkway. These lines that you see here are different kind of engineering configuration issues. They're fundamentally the same, but as we're working with the NCDOT, we're trying to figure out the best way that the light rail can work within this area and within the town's vision. With the station near the Sportsplex and the ENT district, over 485 with a terminus station, or at least interim terminus station, near CPCC Levine. So the pros and cons of this one are it is closer to a large employment center, the hospital. So we're providing very premium service for Novant and the hospital. And because most of this, there's very few street crossings, it does rely for faster and more reliable trains because there's really not that many crossings. We're grade separating, and we're bridging over or under most of them in this situation. However, the station is not easily accessible or visible because it's located below ground in a trench. So you would have to come up with a solution for how people can actually find it, and how you make that comfortable for people to actually get to and feel comfortable waiting on a station in a trench. Serving downtown Matthews will require additional connections. So because of the configuration on campus, it's going to require some additional sidewalks and other investment to figure out how you actually get people from the station to the downtown, which is one of the overarching goals. And it also requires an extensive reconstruction and a possible closure of 51 and Trade during construction because of how complicated this underpass will be. There may be some longer term construction impacts which will affect traffic. So that's a downside or a concern of the locally preferred alternative. So the alternative to that, based on those initial concerns, is to an alternative that really kind of goes, it's different. It was identified through the early on, and we revisited it. And it's the Matthews Street alternative. And these alternatives are just different variations of kind of how you get there. But really fundamentally, it comes, if it's coming off the locally preferred alternative, it then transitions underneath 51 and then along Matthews Street, right in downtown Matthews, with a station at Matthews Street and Trade. And then it parallels on a side running, so it would be on the side of Matthews Street and Matthews Mint Hill Road, the whole way out to Independence Point Parkway. Then transitions into a similar type of alignment as locally preferred alternative, with a station near the ENT or Sportsplex. And then across 485 and with a station at CPCC Levine. So if we just take a moment and look at the pros and cons of that. So the big pro is it directly serves downtown Matthews. So that's kind of a good thing for the town. It's a good thing for CATS to be able to provide that premium connection to Matthews, important stakeholder. It also provides a well-connected, highly visible station at the street level. So that station will be very visible, be very open, and people will be able to find it easily and see around. And it'll be better connected than the one that's in the trench of the locally preferred alternative. It also avoids many of the construction complexities of 51 and Trade, and it does not have as big of a impact or duration of an impact. However, there are construction impacts, and it would require the reconstruction of Matthews Street, and it would also require reconfiguring the driveways along Matthews Street. So that would be rebuilding it. Now, the difference between the LPA and the Matthews Street reconstruction is that we feel like we can maintain traffic and get people through under construction, while the LPA, we feel like there's going to be required to be a closure because of going underground. But unlike the locally preferred alternative, because it does go along Matthews Street, it does cross at grade at Trade. So there are more interactions or potential interactions with vehicles and trains. So there'll be gates and signals and all that sort of thing. But because we're crossing at grade, there's always a chance there could be some interaction between the public and a vehicle at grade versus going underneath. So there's that. So that's a very kind of hopefully brief overview of all the kind of the 8 options that are in this focus area 5. I want to take a moment before we transition to Q&A, I want to make sure folks have lots of opportunities for Q&A, so I'll try to go through this quickly. So that was a whole lot of information. If you would like to go back and think about this, watch this video tomorrow. This video will basically give the same presentation that I just gave. Plus, there'll also be, I'm not sure when the YouTube video will post. It will post relatively soon. All this video will be posted online in the next couple of days, so you'll be able to watch this relatively soon. and get refreshed. But we are asking for your comment. So if you keep scrolling down on the right side, you'll see the focus area 5 comment form. Each focus area kind of has its own comment form. So if you'd like to fill in this information about what's important to you to kind of help us make our decisions as we go forward, to think about which alternative is the best for the community, what's the priority to you, is it travel time, is it cost, those sort of things, and any sort of public comment that you would like to put. Also, we also have a broader public survey. So if you go into the Tell Us More tab, that will take you to a broader survey, and if you click here, it will then take you to the overall survey, which collects more information about the purpose and need and other sort of ideas that you might have. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my drive-through of the online open house and hand it over to Ajnel Poole, who is going to facilitate our question and answer process.
Thank you, Andy. And hello to everyone who is joining us today. Again, like Andy said, my name is Ajnel Poole. I am the Community and Public Relations Specialist for this project. We want to thank you all, the project team and our panelists. We'd like to thank you all for taking the time to attend this virtual meeting this evening. I know this is a bit new for some folks and we're all learning, but we wanted to be able to provide this information in a safe way with the pandemic and everything going on. So we appreciate you being able to adapt with us in the current times. And thank you again to everyone and all of our council members and leadership that are joining us this evening. Just a little housekeeping, like Andy mentioned earlier, we're going to ask that the panelists please stay on mute until you are answering a question. I want to remind our viewers, if you do want to ask the project team a question, please sign into your your Gmail or your YouTube account and type the question in the chat box. And we would encourage you to sign off any organizational VPN or internet just for the best connection. We will be answering as many questions as we can tonight, including those that we received prior to the session via email and phone call and mail. We will do our best to get through all the questions tonight. However, any questions that we did not get to, we will answer in a Q&A document that will go on the website. As a note, we will try to focus all of our questions to Area 5. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And I'm going to pose this question to Jenna Nichols, who is our Deputy Project Manager, which is a frequently asked question that we get often about the connection to the airport and why the LYNX Silver Line will not go directly into the terminal.
Yep, that's a good question. So a project like the Silver Line is a multi-generational 50 to 100 year investment. And so when we're designing, we really need to take that into account. And it's likely that the Charlotte Airport of today is not the same as the Charlotte Airport of the future. It's also growing and expanding with the Charlotte region. So, we will see some development and expansion from where the terminal is today towards Wilkinson Boulevard and then north from there. And the light rail, regardless of the alignment that we select, it will have a premium light rail station at the airport that supports the airport's land use and development plans. That station will be designed so that passengers will have the feeling as if they've arrived at the airport. And what I mean by that is it will have the right wayfinding and it'll have the right connections. It'll be a streamlined experience. It will also be located at an airport multimodal center, and that will function like an extension of the main terminal, which means it will have terminal services such as baggage check and ticketing, and etc. That from that multimodal center, passengers can then hop on a quick people mover, and that will bring them directly into the airport terminal.
Thank you, Jenna, for that response. We are going to previously received question that we had. I don't know, Jenna, if you can answer this or if Andy can answer this one. How long will it take to build this project? Is it going to take years? And what is an estimate of time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I can say is our ability to deliver the project and the time for construction will depend on the funding and a lot of decisions as far as the method in which we intend to actually build it. So the short answer is we're not 100% sure how long the construction will take. We are shooting for this to be complementary to the 2030 plan. However, there'll be many decisions and funding decisions between now and opening day, which will drive the actual delivery date. So it's a little too early for us to estimate or speculate what that construction timeline would be, but we are shooting for, as best we're able to, that somewhere near the 2030 timeframe.
Thank you, Andy. Another question we previously received before the session. During this process, will traffic be a concern during the building of this project?
Yes, traffic will definitely be a concern. So we're going to do quite a bit of analysis to really understand there'll be not a lot of analysis on what traffic is like after we open, but also how do we maintain traffic during construction. So part of our engineering and design will include maintenance of traffic plans and also evaluation, working closely with our partners at NCDOT and CDOT in the town of Matthews. We'll try to come up with alternatives that best mitigate traffic, but inevitably, if we're reconstructing the street, there will be impacts to traffic, and we'll do our best to try to communicate what those impacts are and mitigate those as much as we're able to.
Thank you, Andy. How would the Silver Line cross NC 51 if the alignment going from Monroe to Matthews Street was selected? Would it bridge over an already elevated NC 51 or tunnel under the embankment?
Yeah, that's a good question. Jenna, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So that embankment is pretty high up, and so it will go underneath the embankment, and the road NC 51 will bridge over the light rail. So we're not calling it a tunnel because we're not building a tunnel underneath it. We're really just sort of excavating, removing the material and making it a bridge over the light rail. So it would be open underneath the light rail.
Thank you, Jenna. This might be a good question for Jason Lawrence. Will the bridge over I-485 include a pedestrian bike connection? Will the Silver Line share a bridge with the future Independence Point Parkway extension?
Sure. Thank you, Anjanelle. And I'll start this, and then I'll hand it off to Andy and Regina to fill in some gaps. The LYNX Silver Line rail trail study is looking at how to develop a trail program along the entire 26 miles. And what that means is portions of the rail trail will sometimes parallel the project, and certainly where possible. Other parts we will potentially run along sidewalks and multi-use paths and other greenway and other pedestrian projects along the corridor. It'll be a mixture of pedestrian projects along the whole 26 miles. In the case of over 485, we are evaluating, we're just getting started with this effort. Design's a little bit ahead of us, and we're working with the design team to determine what would be the best way to get across 485. Would it be with the bridge of the light rail? Will it be with the bridge of Independence Point Parkway? Is it included with that project? So we're looking at a couple of different options in that area. And so, Andy, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, the only thing to add, I think, is that, at this point, we intend to be on a separate bridge, a separate independent bridge from the Independence Point Parkway. They're just not moving. It's unlikely they're going to move forward at the same time to take advantage of that. So it's likely to be a separate bridge. And there's a couple different ways that we can provide that access. I think I can feel pretty confident that there will be premium pedestrian access across 45 on one of the bridges. It's just we have to kind of get into the details, figure out which is the best way to get it done.
Thank you, guys. We have a question. Is this going to affect the Fox Ridge Cedar Glen area? And this might tie into any type of property impacts. So we have quite a few questions about what does property impacts and relocation for residential look like, if you want to touch on that topic.
Right. So that's a good question. So regarding the specific question, the Cedar Ridge or sorry, the Fox Ridge, apologize. There's a couple alternatives that are being considered that are in the general area that I believe is being discussed. We really, at this point, don't know enough about either the impacts to determine what the real estate impacts on any particular property are. I'd say that there are some alternatives that are being discussed that are in the general area. And so as we really refine the alignment to understand and really kind of get into the engineering details of it, we'll know a lot more about what those impacts might be and how that will affect individual property owners. So just to kind of give, we get a lot of real estate questions. So I've got it every night we've done this meeting. So I'll take a step back and talk about real estate for a second. So part of the process, and as I said earlier, we're really early on trying to figure out where the alignment is, and we don't have a sufficient design to really understand what those property impacts will be. So the first step in that is really to progress the design so that we really do understand what the footprint of the project is. Where are we grading? Where are the utilities? Where are the slopes? Those sorts of things, which will really drive the real estate acquisition. So once we kind of have a lot more definition and specificity on what it is that we need to buy, we will then and we also need to then complete our environmental impact statement. So we'll have to go through a very rigorous environmental process. Once we have those two things, meaning we know what we need to buy and we have the permission to buy real estate, those are the two key things, then we'll then engage in real estate acquisition along the corridor. So we'll have agents reach out to individual property owners and make an offer to acquire their property. And we will seek to acquire all properties amicably as much as possible, and then move forward with the project at that point. So that's kind of the overall flow of how that's going to go. We really don't know exactly how long this is going to take. A lot of it depends on funding and how fast we're moving forward. I would say it's somewhere in the 3 to 4 year time frame before we're really ready to do any sort of acquisition.
Thank you, Andy, for that very thorough response. Another question, how will this benefit me as a resident, especially since I live off of Independence?
Well, I mean, I think that having another transportation option along Independence is always a good thing. And I'm going to hand this off to some other people who can answer probably more artfully than I can, but Independence traffic is always going to be Independence traffic. And having another option that's outside of congestion and free of congestion along Independence is a good thing. It can provide you access to special events, Panthers games, community resources, education and employment opportunities. So there's lots of benefits that come with a new mode of transportation that's outside of traffic. And maybe, I don't know if Jenna or Jason want to add anything to that. Sure.
And I'll just add to what you said a little bit, Andy, and then I'll hand it over to Jason. But building the light rail will build capacity into the region. So even if the way I read that question, I also wasn't sure if that person was saying that they don't live near Independence, so they wouldn't use it. If that's the question, even if you're not using it, if the person who would have otherwise been sitting in traffic next to you is using it, then that's a benefit to you to have others using that light rail system because that's building capacity into the region and taking other cars off the road. So even if you don't see yourself using it, which would be unfortunate, you could just picture that there's other people that will be using it, and then more open road for you.
So I'll just add a couple things too. If you think about Independence and all of our roadways, traffic congestion will continue over time as we continue to grow. And one of the greatest things about a light rail project, if it takes 30 minutes to go from one end to the other, or 20 minutes to go from wherever your station is to your destination, it will take that amount of time today, and it'll take that amount of time in 20 years from now. It's that consistent, reliable travel time that you always have. And I think also our approach to this project is not just a light rail project. We're looking at transit-oriented development. We're looking at an entire 26-mile long rail trail. That's not something we did initially with the Blue Line extension. We're coordinating with the Charlotte 2040 plan. And so you don't have to be right beside a station or the alignment to see the benefits of the project. There'll be mobility services coming out of every station. So think about this in the context as an overall corridor program. And I think the benefits of Silver Line will reach much further than just the quarter mile and half mile distance from each station.
Thank you all for contributing to that answer. CSX has generally not been the most accommodating on projects. Is that true? Is there a decent chance that they will allow option 2A?
Yeah, so we have had some coordination meetings with CSX. But anytime you're entering into a CSX or any railroad right away for that matter, there are definitely some challenges. They have very high standards for how they accept work. So it will always be challenging to enter into a CSX, and there is a risk that we won't be able to, deliver a CSX alignment because it does require an agreement with CSX. So that's a risk, that's a trade-off with that alignment. There are some other comments about that it's faster and straighter. I agree 100%. But the trade-off is there's challenges and risks associated with entering into the railroad alignment and actually reaching agreement with the railroad on that. So that's always a risk and a challenge anytime you're trying to operate a light rail within, or any transit or anything for that matter, within a railroad right away.
Thank you, Andy. What is the anticipated frequency of trains at various stations, such as downtown Matthews, etc.?
Jason, you wanna take that one? That might be a good kind of service question.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. It's anticipated, if I heard the question correctly, you're talking about the frequency of the train service at the stations. And it's been our goal to look at a 10-minute frequency at 3-car trains. That is what's on the, is planned for the Blue Line. Once we go to 3-car trains on that service, and we would do the same for Silver Line. And I hope that if that answers your question, please clarify.
Thank you, Jason. Also, has there been a study on usage of Silver Line versus tremendous costs of entire project?
That's sort of what we're doing. So there has been some initial, as part of the system planning work, there certainly was a lot of initial work to, verify that this is making sense. Seems like a good thing to do. However, one of the key things that this project will do is that we'll have to really sharpen our pencils and get into that, because we'll ultimately have to justify this project for funding. So what that task that you kind of was identified is really going to be one of the major activities that is important for this project early on, to make sure that we can actually deliver this project, because it does require funding and there's a process for that. And part of that test that we have to pass is to verify that the benefits are great enough to outweigh the cost.
Thank you, Andy. Which focus area would be the first area of the project, and when would the focus area 5 begin?
I think this question kind of gets to like a question of segmentation, meaning are we going to build the project in phases? And the short answer is, we're not 100% sure. At this point, we are moving forward as if this project is all going to be built with one phase. I think as we start to move forward into more of our constructability reviews and really have a better snapshot of funding and how we're going to pay for this and how does the construction phasing work, we'll know a lot more. But at this point, we're moving forward with this project as one big project, and we'll kind of answer that question as we further our design.
Thank you, Andy. Another 2-part question. For the Village Lake and the Marca option, please provide more detail about the level of the resident dislocation and the pro and cons of how and where stations would be built for each option.
So let me share my screen again. That might be helpful. There we go. Hope people can see that. So these lines, you've got the Marca option, and then you've got the locally preferred alternative. So another short answer is that we're not 100% sure the level of residential relocation. We know that there will be significantly more on this because there's more multifamily, so the opportunity for relocation is much higher. We really need to figure out what the alignment is as we get through here to really come up with a number of relocations. So it's kind of a little bit of a moving target to this alignment till we really progress our design a little bit further. While the Lumarca option we believe would be less amount of properties because of these are more single family in nature and these are more multifamily in nature. So I guess the short answer there is that we really need to progress our design so that we can have a better understanding of that residential impact before we can fully answer the question.
Thank you, Andy. This might be a TOD question, or Andy, you can answer this one. What kind of redevelopment opportunities would there be along the CXX option 2A? Will Monroe Road see any benefit along that stretch if 2A were adopted?
I think that's a John or Monica question, probably.
Yeah, I'll start that one off. As Andy mentioned earlier in his presentation, one of the options that looked at the opportunity for TOD kind of did weigh heavily in that decision for that alignment. But as we go through this process, we're also doing the TOD study, as you mentioned earlier, too. And in that study, we'll be doing a few things. One is market analysis and looking at TOD readiness, looking at which areas are really ripe or could be really good areas for redevelopment. And another level of that study will be looking at housing and affordable housing as well, to address the other issue that kind of tied to the last question about displacement. And we have a great housing consultant team on our TOD study team. So if there's any questions about that, we can answer those as well. But also looking at land use. So part of any area plan study, we can look at land uses that are complementary, not just to the station itself, but also those around it, and what areas could be better for employment uses or a mixture of uses preferably. But not every station area is alike. So the importance of doing this study in advance is looking at the uniqueness of each area and which are better suited for maybe higher density, or looking at preservation opportunities as well. And just to have a really dynamic station area plan with a mixture of uses that includes open space. We have Park and Rec on our team. So that will be starting in the spring after the final alignment is decided.
Thank you, John. And I'll give anyone else a second if they want to add on to that. It looks like you might be able to answer a couple more questions about stations. About real estate, which side of Monroe Road is the Galleria station or all of the stations? And will we be adding parking decks at some of the stations?
So regarding which side of the road, so for Monroe option, the current concept is that we're in the median. So it would be similar to that of North Tryon Street. So you would then cross the street, or there would be a pedestrian bridge taking you to the median, depending on how we configure it. And we will be adding parking lots and or garages at certain stations that make sense as far as having good catchment areas for potential customers who might want to get out of their vehicle on Independence or 485 or Monroe to get on the light rail and go where they want to go. So absolutely, parking is a big part of this.
Thank you, Andy. In the essence of time, I'm going to see if I can categorize some of the frequently asked questions that we got tonight. We had a couple questions about funding, and I think this is a great opportunity for Jason to talk about the regional transit plan and what type of funding opportunities that there might be coming up to have that discussion.
Sure. So as far as the regional transit plan, we are embarking on the first of its kind for our region, a regional transit effort called Connect Beyond, and CATS is doing that in partnership with the Central Carolina Regional Council. And it's 12 counties across 2 states, and 3 of those counties are on the LYNX Silver Line, so Mecklenburg, Gaston, and Union. And we're looking at high capacity transit corridors, commuter rail options, human services, transportation, like your paratransit kind of service for elderly, disabled, and veteran services, and access to hospitals. And we're looking at ways to to talk to each county about what type of transit services they would like to see. And that we will begin some discussion about implementation strategies and what options there are out there for funding for counties outside of Mecklenburg. I'll also say there is a group, a task force that's been put together by the mayor of Charlotte called Charlotte Moves, and there is some other town representation on that as well. There's some representation from Cornelius, Huntersville, and Matthews on that. And they meet, if you go to, on the City of Charlotte website, you can look up Charlotte Moves Task Force, and you can see when those groups meet. And they are looking at opportunities for funding and how to build an overall transformational mobility network and what funding options exist for that. And Anjanelle, if I may, I did see one thing come to the chat, and I just did want to clarify something. There was a question about the town of Matthews funding. I just want to clarify our current funding structure. Mecklenburg County has a half-cent transit sales tax, and all of Mecklenburg County residents pay into that. So all of us have been paying into the transit operating and capital for all of our projects for the Blue Line and bus service. So all of the towns, including Matthews, I've already been contributing for over 20 years into the transit funding program.
Thank you, Jason. I'm trying to see. Could you expand on what you mean when you say going under Matthews Mint Hill Road? I'm not sure if you touched on that one before.
Right. So what the concept, and I think you're speaking to the locally preferred alternative. And so when you go under, when I say under, I'm meaning you would then go below street elevation or below the current ground elevation in a cut to go under 51 in Trade Street because there's too much traffic on those streets to cross that grade, and it's been determined that there's too much visual impact to go over on a bridge. So when you go under those streets in kind of this trench or cut condition, you're below grade on the hospital campus as well, and so you're by nature you're lower than the current ground elevation. We also don't, operationally, the light rail doesn't cross streets at grade on kind of angles. So it's kind of an operational concern. So anytime we're crossing a street, we're crossing on a 90 degrees. So because in that section, we're crossing at an angle to get to the Independence Point Parkway, we have to go either below grade or over grade, bridge over, or go under in a trench. And so it makes more sense, since we're down for the station on Novant anyways, to just go ahead and go on and then go past and under Matthews Mint Hill Road on a trench, and then come up on the side running condition on the kind of the southern side of Matthews Mint Hill Road. That's what I mean by go under Matthews Mint Hill Road.
Thank you, Andy. Might a pedestrian or bike trail be included in the median of a reconstructed Monroe Road?
I mean, we would talk about that with the team for sure. I mean, normally in a median, that's not an overly comfortable place for pedestrians and bicyclists to be, but we would certainly want to work with the rail trail team and Jason's team and figure out what the best solution is.
Thank you, Jason. What buffers will you have to reduce noise in nearby neighborhoods, in particular Sardis Woods?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as part of this early environmental work, one of the big things we look at in the environmental work is a noise assessment. So we'll be looking at from neighborhoods, or what we call sensitive receptors, neighborhoods or residential areas or hospitals or whatever. We'll look out to identify any noise or vibration impacts that could be part of the project. And if it's determined through this evaluation and this study that there are any impacts, then we would do a mitigation. And that mitigation could be a wall, it could be other equipment that you put on the light rail or on the tracks to make sure that it's not as loud as it could be, or some sort of dampener. So there's a lot of different methods that we've used in the past to improve noise and vibration. But the first thing is really to do the study to evaluate what areas we think would have a noise impact and what areas don't, and then go from there to determine what the appropriate thing to do is.
Thank you, Andy. What year will the Silver Line operate?
Well, that kind of gets back to the earlier question. It really kind of depends on funding decisions and operational and construction decisions between now and then. So, again, very difficult for us to say at this early stage.
We have a question about the possible impact around Galleria Station and parking, and when we will have more details about where the station will be and parking. And this person is interested in, increased car noise, etc.
Well, I think I kind of answered the Galleria question about it being in the median and that we would have parking. We don't have a detail for where that parking is or how access would be. I mean, part of the evaluation when we identify a parking lot or parking garage, we're adding traffic to the street network. So part of our traffic analysis will also evaluate expected daily usership of the parking garage or parking lot. That will be filtered into our traffic evaluation or traffic modeling to ensure that if there are traffic impacts or greater than expected traffic impacts by the transit project, that we would mitigate them in some way. We would maybe widen a road or add a turn lane here or there, even if it's away from the project to improve traffic flow.
Thank you, Andy. And again, we just have time for a few more questions. We have a question about the Greenway. So I think we have someone here from Park and Rec. What kind of impact would the mid-alpine alignment have on the Greenway? Would the train be visible from the Greenway? How would the tracks interact with the creek? And if anyone wants that one.
This is Lee Jones. I'm the director of the Mecklenburg County Park and Recreation Department. I think it's a little early to determine what the impact would be at this stage of the study. We're going to hope to minimize any impact to the Greenway, as this is a well-established amenity at the park, and it provides great connectivity. So we're going to work very closely with the team to see what we can do to make sure that that impact, if any negative impact is foreseeable, would be minimized.
Thank you, Lee. It looks like we have answered all of the questions or similar themed questions. So I will close it out with this last question, which is from Olivia. When will the alignment options be expected to be finalized? And will there be public comments again before those decisions are made?
That's a great question, a great stepping off point for the meeting. So the process we are right now, we're wrapping up the early scoping process. So by October 14th, we'll have collected all the comments from this round of meeting, which in those comments are really focused on public input on the option, the locally preferred alternative, and the options under consideration. We'll then use that public input along with further engineering evaluation and input, stakeholder input, to narrow this down to ideally one locally preferred alternative that we take back out to a public meeting in the January timeframe is kind of what we're shooting for right now. There may be design options out there at that meeting as well. So, we'll kind of see how this fall goes and see what kind of public input we get. So then we'll have another opportunity for the public for some engagement in the January timeframe. And then ultimately this goes back to the Metropolitan Transit Commission for information and adoption. And that would be in February and March is kind of what we're shooting for that. And those are open public processes as well. So there's at least, 3 big open public opportunities for engagement and input as we go forward until we finally adopt the updated alignment in March. We're also open to, and we're also available and open to provide engagement opportunities at request. So we've done a lot of focused neighborhood meetings over the summer. So if you'd like for us to come out and talk to your neighborhood, please reach out to Ajanelle Poole, and she can, and right there's all of her information, and I'm stealing her thunder. So I will hand it back to Ajanelle, who can kind of talk through some of the how the comment process works.
Actually, you were stealing my thunder. So.
I'm stealing somebody's thunder.
Just kidding. Anyway, so again, Andy said that our early scoping comment period ends October 14th. So we encourage you all to go online to our website to find that the survey and the interactive comment map. Our website is ridetransit.org/LYNX You can also shoot us an email at lynxsilverline@publicinput.com, or you can give us a call at 704-336-RIDE. That's 704-336-7433. You can send us a letter as well. Send it to CATS, care of Miss Ajanel Poole, 600 East 4th Street, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28202. We hope that you all enjoyed this presentation this evening and felt like it was a valuable process and a good use of time. We hope you feel like you've learned some stuff about this alignment. We will be compiling all of the comments and the questions and addressing them and posting them to our website. Again, it's ridetransit.org/LYNX Silverline. And that is also where you can find the link to the interactive comment mapping tool that Andy went through tonight. And we encourage you to make sure you get in there and take a look. That website will only be up until October 14th. The interactive mapping tool will only be up until October 14th. Our project website, ridetransit.org/LYNX Silverline, will be around for the entirety of the project, and that will house updates to what's going on with our public input and anything going on with the project. So you can always access that website for additional information. Thank you all for your time and your focus tonight. We appreciate all of the great comments and questions and your time this evening. Be sure to stay tuned and stay involved. Your input is absolutely critical to helping us make the right decisions on this transformational project moving forward. Thank you.